listening to The Motherhood Experience, a podcast where you are part of the conversation with moms, for moms, and by moms. Let's jump into this episode with me, your host, Val Kleppen. Hello and welcome back to The Motherhood Experience. I am so glad that you come here every week and join us for a new episode. This week's episode is definitely a unique one, and it is with great honor and pleasure that I get to introduce you to my friend, Heather Madson. Heather will be sharing her story about being a bereaved mother. Now, Heather has no living children, but she is still a mother nonetheless, and her story is one that will touch you, I am sure. So without further ado, I'd like to invite you to join my conversation with bereaved mother and friend, Heather Madson. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. I am here with my friend, Heather Madson. Heather, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Heather has an extremely unique story, and I'm thrilled that she agreed to come and share with us on this episode. Heather, I would like for you to start by saying how you and I met, and if you wouldn't mind telling the story about that night, because there's a little bit of levity in there as well.
Yes, for sure. We met, I think it was the fall of 2018. I started going to the grief group at the Red River Valley Hospice, where you were the group leader. And I was convinced by friends to go. I was not going to go. I expected to walk into what I pictured as AA, like chairs in like stadium row, like seating where you came up to a podium and you're like, "Hi, I'm Heather, and I've lost a baby," kind of situation. I'm like, I'm just sitting in the back row. That's fine. I'm not sharing. And I walk in and all the chairs are in a circle. And I'm like, great. That's not at all how I pictured. I believe I had to have a drink or two before I even showed up because I did not have the courage to show up on my own. And then, of course, the only seat open was right next to you, brand spanking new. The only good thing is you started to the left. So we went around the entire circle before we got to me so I could be like, oh, this is how it goes.
Right.
But it was, yes, that just kind of set our friendship into motion, right? Day one.
And I think, with facilitating support group, I often formed relationships with a lot of people, but you and I just clicked in a different way.
Yes.
And I have just appreciated so much the fact that we've been able to stay in touch and remain friends all these years later. I remember how hard I laughed the first time you told me that you you had mustered up the courage to walk through the doors of group after like a beer or two after. I remember laughing really hard when you told me that.
Yeah, I
So
can't remember. It like came up in group once. You were like, okay, let's talk about like how you guys came to group or something, because we had all told our stories so many times and we were just like chatting and I'm like, well, if you want to know, I was coming to AA and
a
I
little
wasn't
buzzed.
a little buzzed and I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to go. And I was nervous and it was like, sign this form and do all this. And I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to have to sit next to the teacher. And I'm like, like it was like all the first day, like scares in one thing, but I made it. I survived.
It
It
worked
was
out.
okay.
And you came back. You came back.
I did multiple times.
Right. So tell me about your entrance into motherhood and how you ended up in grief group.
Sure. For years prior to 2018, I had tried to get pregnant a few times. I was married. My husband was surgically sterile. He had 3 children of his own prior to getting married to me. So I had stepkids, but I had always longed to have kids of my own. And so I had tried, I think it was like 4 rounds of like IUI, and it never took. Like things just weren't going well for me and it was expensive. Like it is very expensive, and it's weird because you're like going through a catalog and picking out your donor. And
Mhm.
like it's not like your typical way clearly of getting pregnant, but lots of people do it. But I just got to a point where it was too expensive. We had two different kids of his coming to live with us on and off full time, which caused extra expenses because he was still paying child support, but then we were supporting them full time. It was this whole disaster, in all honesty. And so I took a break from it. And then, like 2016, I decided, you know what? I'd like to try again. So I took time, finally found a donor that I liked, and then you can just like put it in storage and like pay for it sitting there for months and months and months. And then my marriage kind of was already in a rocky state, but it really took a turn in 2017. And I ended up actually getting ready to move out. Like I was making my move to like end my marriage, move out. Things were at its final point. It was not in good standing. And I was like, okay, well, I'm moving out at the end of October. Let's just use up that sperm. Like, why wouldn't you? I don't know why. I just didn't want to pay for it in storage anymore. So I know it's so terrible. And so I did it in September and it failed again of 2017. And then 2017 October, I tried it again at the beginning of the month. You know, you give yourself a shot, all the things. And lo and behold, by the 23rd of October, I had You're Pregnant. And so that started my pregnancy journey. About 5 weeks later, the one really great thing about doing IUI is that you get so many like ultrasounds because they check you literally throughout the entire process. They'll
Right.
let you wait like a couple weeks, but usually by like week 4, you're in there having like intrauterine ultrasounds. So like I got all these pictures of all these things, and about week 5 or 6, they're like, "Oh, so there's actually two babies." And I was like, "I'm sorry, you said, huh?" And they're like, "There's actually two babies. They're both in their own amniotic sac, but you have twins." And I was like, it was kind of like a dream come true, I guess. You know, like I couldn't get pregnant. I had struggles. And then now I'm getting divorced, but then it was like all the like fear set in, like I'm getting divorced. I'm a single parent. I just moved into my friend's basement because I have nowhere else to go at
Mhm.
this point in time. Like now I'm having twins, like that's two daycare bills and two kids to make sure they get to like at the same time. Like it all of a sudden just kind of hit and there was all this fear. um Unfortunately, by week 8, I had miscarried baby B. Miscarriage looks much different in a twin formation because your body just absorbs. It doesn't come out of you, so it's not like you're bleeding and all the things. So that was like hard to understand. And then it was like, but baby A is doing great, you know? So baby A was growing and all the things. And I got checked for a couple more weeks. And then finally you hit, I can't remember what week it is, but they're like, everything's normal, you're good, so we'll see you back at 20 weeks.
Mhm.
I think you go in for like a heartbeat check in between there, but you don't get another ultrasound then until you're 20 weeks. Mine actually happened at 22 weeks. It was a little later just because of scheduling and stuff. And I went by myself. It was really snowy that day. My friend dropped me off at work and then dropped me off. And then she's like, "Oh, I'll pick you up afterwards." I'm like, "Okay, I'll let you know." Just thinking I'm going to go in, get an ultrasound, get my gender put into an envelope, and then give it to my friend who was going to do a gender reveal. And I wasn't sure about a gender reveal yet, but I was humming and hawing. But I'm like, at least she has the envelope. We'll figure it out. And it took a really, really long time. And then they had me get up, go walk around. And I thought it was just because she wasn't in the right spot or she was very active. Um, she was later dubbed as my little acrobat because she was always spinning and spinning and spinning, like always doing, circles and stuff in there. And um, they're like, okay, you need to go talk to the doctor or whatever. So I saw just the PA, not the doctor. And she's like, okay, well, unfortunately, there's some things that we see. Um, we need you to talk to a specialist. And with that, we can't really tell you a ton of what's going on, but this is what we're seeing. Her limbs aren't as long as we'd expect them to be. There's just some signs of maybe a heart defect and all this stuff, but we're going to have you see a specialist as soon as possible. And all I heard in all of that was, there's something wrong with my baby. Like,
Mhm.
I didn't hear pretty much any of the rest of it. All I heard was, your baby is damaged, is broken. Like that's what it felt like.
Right.
And so my friend came to pick me up, and I remember I got in her vehicle and she's like, "Oh, how'd it go?" Because I just texted her, like, "You can pick me up." And I just stared straight ahead. And I just remember saying, "There's something wrong." And she's like, "What?" And she instantly, like, I could see tears in her eyes. And I'm like, she's like, "What?" And I'm like, "I honestly, I don't know. They don't know yet. I have to see, especially." And she's like, "What should I do? Where should we go?" And I'm like, "Well, we need to go home." Like,
Yeah.
there's nowhere else to go right now. Like, let's just go home. And then they called me and they actually got me in right away the next day. Um, and my friend who I was living with came with me. I was like, I think I need someone else there to hear, because I'm not hearing. I'm just not hearing what's going on. So I got to have the really fun procedure of having an amniocentesis. And for those who don't know, that's just sticking a big needle in your belly to pull out some of your amniotic fluid. And that's a scary and not fun thing to do. Um, and basically, I had to wait like 4 days or 5 days for the results. I think it was actually four, but it was like the longest 4 days of my entire existence, I feel. Like,
Right.
you're just waiting and waiting and waiting. And basically, during that procedure and during the checkup, they're like, you have signs for Downs. Your baby's showing signs for Down syndrome, but it could also be for like trisomy, the two different trisomies, and it could be for a different genetic disorder or this or that. We do see a possible heart defect. Like, we're just not, we're not sure. Like, all these signs, we don't see a nasal bone, just these things that you don't think about and you
Mhm.
don't know until you're in the situation. And then when they called me on that Thursday, my friend had planned this gender reveal with just like a small group. It was like her family and her mom and dad and her sister and her kids, and just like this small little group. We were meeting at Spitfire in West Fargo, and I was going to pop a balloon, I guess. And she was like panicked because she's like, I don't want to do it if there's, you know,
Right.
sorrow and sadness and all the things. And I I remember right away, like, during those 4 days, I was almost selfishly scared about it having like a genetic disorder, like Down syndrome, for example. At least, now in retro, I was being scared for the wrong reasons.
Mm.
Like, I just wanted them to have a normal life, and turns out I'd rather that they would have just had a life, kind of a thing. Like,
Mhm.
um it's all changed in motion there. But yes, they called and they're like, turns out she does not have any genetic disorder. Um, Also, turns out we have confirmed her gender, but we won't tell you today if you're finding out later. I'm like, yes, please don't. And then they're like, you can call back tomorrow to make sure that it matches what the card said. I'm like, okay. And then she does have a heart defect, but we're going to go through all the processes of checking her growth, doing all the things. So I got put on the books for 2 a week, um, ultrasounds, every other week, meetings with the specialist. So the next, well, it would have been 12 weeks, 10 weeks. It would have
Well,
been 10 weeks.
let me pause and just ask. So this is right before the gender reveal party that you get this phone
Yes.
call.
Yes.
So
Like,
you go
literally.
you go from these several days of roller coaster, what could be wrong, what's the best case scenario in this scenario, like what do I need to mentally prepare for, physically prepare for, to them telling you it's not so bad. There's just this little heart thing. We're pretty sure that we can work with it. Enjoy your gender reveal party.
Yes.
So what
Yes,
was that like then the rest of the day?
it there was like a weight that was lifted, but then you felt like you still weren't out of the woods yet because there was still
Mhm.
like a couple unknowns, right? Like they're like, we got to get you into the heart specialist and talk about that. But then also, I guess I missed a couple things too. She had an omphalocele, but it wasn't like the bad kind of omphalocele where like her heart was, like it wasn't her heart sticking out of her body or a bowel sticking out where it wasn't supposed to. It was coming through her umbilical cord, but it could have caused issues with like nutrition. And that's where they think there was possible why she was smaller than she needed to be, because this omphalocele was, part of her bowel was coming through um, her umbilical cord. So like, we'll have to set you up with like a surgeon for a walkthrough and to talk about all the things. But yeah, everything seemed like there were still all these unknowns, but everything seemed so much lighter. Like it was
Mhm.
like, okay, well, these things sound so much more doable. Like babies have surgery all the time, like it'll be okay. I know so many kids who've had heart defects that they've fixed, and yeah, they're scary, but these kids are now running and playing and doing all the things, and I still don't know what kind of heart thing it is yet. We don't know how
Yeah.
bad it is. And so it
So
was really two-sided.
and so you went from kind of a conscious cloud of just confusion and I don't even know what to expect to feeling relief.
Yes.
And even though you still didn't know entirely what to expect, it just felt like you could catch your breath again.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. And like you
So that
could celebrate.
okay.
Like I felt like at that point I could celebrate. So pop the balloon. I wore blue because I thought I was having a boy, just because I figured my parents had girls, my sister had a boy. I'm like, I'm going to have a boy because it's going to be like this thing where we don't have girls. We're just having boys. But then
Okay.
turns out she was a girl. So
Yeah.
then it was like I got to celebrate her,
Right.
and it was fun for at least that time frame. And it was fun and exciting for a while afterwards. But yes, then we kind of moved into the next phase where it was the 2-week appointments and the checks and the balances. And as they were checking, she only had one, her cord was 2 strands instead of 3. So
Hmm.
normal umbilical cord is like a 3-strand cord. Hers only had 2, which they said could also be part of the her being small. So in
Mhm.
my head, I would tell myself, she's just going to be a tiny baby. She's
Mhm.
not going to take after her behemoth of a mother. She is going to be this little teeny tiny baby. I was a big baby and I was chunky, and my mom talks about how I was a big old baby. My sister was this skinny little grandpa shriveled up thing, but I was like full and looked like I should be walking. I don't know. So like all the things, all the things. But I just told myself, I'm like, I'm just going to have this teeny little girl. Like,
Mhm.
who knew? But here it is. So that's kind of what I would tell myself. And I think you do in situations like that. You like, I'll call it self soothing in a way. Like,
Yeah.
you're trying to hang on to the things that, you know, you can the things you can control, and then the things you
Mhm.
can't, you try to make like light of them or excuses for them or what have you. Like that's
For
kind
sure.
of how I went through it. And the ironic thing is, I believe that December in 2017, I had a friend, I was just newly pregnant, just a couple months, and I had a friend from back home, from where I grew up, and she actually carried her baby the 9 months and she was stillborn. And I just thought to myself that time, and how ridiculously naive I was at the time. But all I could think to myself was how horrible. I feel so bad for her. I had no idea. Like I really had the things that were coming out of my mouth were not even enough. And so in my pregnancy, then all this is going on, and I'm living and knowing all these things are happening. Like
Yeah.
it didn't come as a surprise, right? Well, a surprise, but not. Like the things
Yeah.
that were going on, at least I knew there was things happening. I had to go to the doctors every week and have all these things checked out. And, she literally checked all the boxes all the time. So then you almost got yourself a false hope because
Mhm.
um, she was practicing breathing on her own in there. They do their practice breathing. She was
Right.
sucking her thumb. So many pictures of her, like hand in the air, sucking her thumb, yawning. Like I have videos of her like yawning, and like it's like you're seeing this baby that is completely healthy. Like in a way, she looks completely healthy on pictures. She's doing all the things they expect them to do, how many movements they have to make in however amount of time. And yet at the end of it, I still didn't end up with her. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it almost seems surreal to go back through it all. And I remember I had just gone to the doctor for a checkup on like a Monday. And Wednesday night, I taught church school. And so I was there for the last night, which would have been, well, let's see, fourth, third, it would have been like the 2nd of May. And so I
Mhm.
had been to the doctor on May 1st or the end of April, one or the two. Everything was fine. She was practicing breathing, all the things. And when I got home that night, about 11 p.m., I got a horrible pain in my back on that Wednesday. And I don't know if that's when it happened or if that was just my body prepping it. Like, I have no idea. But the next morning, I went to bed, and my friend had one of her friends, their dad had passed away. So she had been gone um, to Wapaton to be with her and her family and things. And the funeral was actually on Thursday the 3rd. And I got up that morning and I had seen her, and I'm like, she's just not moving a lot yet today. And my friend's like, have you had, try eating something spicy, maybe try having some caffeine, do something. And I'm like, yeah. And so I got to work and I didn't feel right. I think I knew,
Yeah.
um, but I didn't feel right, and nothing I did um, caused anything different. And finally, about 9 a.m., I was like, I think I'm going to go to the doctor. And if I hadn't, I think my work family would have ripped me out of work and sent me because they were concerned. And I went, and I was making excuses. Like, as soon as I got in there, I'm like, sometimes she just moves so much that it is hard to get her heartbeat. And it wasn't a lie, but it's like I knew, but I didn't. And I was like trying to make it okay, like
Mhm.
keep looking, don't give up,
Mhm.
like please don't give up. And they couldn't, and they couldn't. And then they called someone else in and then grabbed a different Doppler, and they do all the things. And I just remember the I think she was a midwife. She looked at me and she just said, unfortunately, your baby is gone. And I'm pretty sure I cried. I'm not a crier. Like, it's just not something in my nature to cry in front of people. Like by myself, sure, but in front of people, I just like to like hold my emotion in, and I just sobbed and I didn't know what to do. Like, what do you do at that point? Like, I didn't know what was next. And I had text a coworker, and I text my friend Jenny, and um, I had called my mom. And earlier that week, I had told mom, I'm like, I have an appointment on Friday. If you don't hear from me until Friday, don't be alarmed. And I called her on Thursday. And the minute I called her, it's like my mom knew too. And
Mhm.
she like instantly started crying because she knew something had to have been wrong, because she knew I wasn't going to call her until after my appointment. It was kind of like this whole thing where she felt it too. It was
Yeah.
strange.
Yeah.
Um, but I literally couldn't drive home that day. I thought I was going to, and I tried to get up, and I just felt like the world was spinning. And
Yeah.
so three of my coworkers, they came caravan, grabbed my car, drove me to my house, and I laid there. And they had told me at the hospital, like, I'm like, do I have to stay here right now? And they're like, no. They're like, but think about checking in, you know, sometime today. And I'm like, okay. Well, my friend Jenny was coming back from Wapaton. She's like, wait for me. And
Mhm.
so I did wait for her, and I took a shower. Um, I laid in bed, and I just kind of laid there. I didn't know what else to do. Like, there was nothing to say, there was nothing to do. I just
Yeah.
felt completely lost, I guess.
So I want to skip ahead just a little bit to
Hmm.
once she was delivered.
Yes.
Did you have her name picked out already?
So it's funny, I did. Once I found out it was a girl, then I was trying to find a name and it was horrible. Like, I had a boy name picked out, and that's why, I mean, I think I was set on a boy because I'm like, I think I
Right,
got the boy name under control, but girl
right.
names were like bad. And we were sitting on with my friend's mom actually at lunch one day, and she looked at me and she's like, she would always throw names out. Like, she was like digging in. She's like, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? And the one day she's like, have you thought about the name Palmer? And I was like, it is so weird you say that. Like, my great grandpa's name is Palmer. My dad's middle name is Palmer. And I was like, oh, I just didn't think about it on the girl side of things, but
Mhm.
that will work. So I didn't really have her middle name picked out, I don't think, until that all happened. Grace seemed to be um, appropriate in that case. But yes, Palmer had been picked out. So Palmer Grace it was.
Yeah. So when you were able to deliver her, which was and that's a story that probably could have its own episode as well. But when you were able to deliver her and you see her, uh, did they give you an official diagnosis or reason for why she didn't make it to term?
They didn't actually when I was in there before I went home after they had told me that she didn't have a heartbeat, the specialist happened to be in there in that part of the hospital that day. So he came straight over and he came in the room. I thought it was really nice that he came. He's like, I heard and I'm so sorry. He's like, unfortunately, sometimes in these cases with all these things kind of culminating together, that can happen. But then when I delivered her, her cord was wrapped around her neck. And they said, she was active. And then with a two vessel cord instead of three or whatever, that it's possible that it kinked itself or something. They said it could be anything. I could have done an autopsy, but I chose not to. I felt like she had gone through enough. And I, at that point, would have had to have given her up right away, and I was
Mhm,
able to keep her overnight
mhm,
in those
mhm,
cuddle cots that they have that are spectacular. Um, which that was something I needed also.
mhm. Yeah, that time. And so this I'm going to back up a little bit. When you were trying to go through the process of getting pregnant and also enduring there was a lot going on with your husband at the time.
Yes.
Um so you're enduring kind of this there was just some weird abuse stuff going on.
Yes.
And then you find out you already knew that your divorce was coming. You find out that you're pregnant. You're moving out. All of these things are happening at the same time. There were still loose ends to tie up with your soon to be ex, and even
Hmm.
his kids were still reaching out to you instead of to him. And
Yes.
what was like, how did you catch a break during that time? Did you ever think, I guess I'll just ask this. Did you ever think maybe this was not the best idea for me to time it like this?
100%. I thought that a few times, like, okay, maybe I should have waited. Um, and tied up all the ends first so I didn't have to deal with all of the extra because there was a lot
Mhm.
um, of extra, including, the fact that my ex husband thought he should be the father. Um, Long after he found like there was just like a lot of weird things that were going on, and his one child was troubled and in and out of facilities for getting help and things like that. And there was just so many moving parts that I thought, yeah, this probably wasn't a great idea, but it would be unlike me not to just pile on all the things at one time and just hope for the best. I don't know. That just seems like something I would do anyway,
Yeah.
for you and everyone else that knows me. But yeah, that's unfortunately my personality. But yes, I had reservations on what I did.
Hmm.
Um, and then after I felt guilty. You know, they talk about mom guilt, but I felt guilty for every moment that I felt like it was a bad idea to try at the time. So every time that
Hmm.
I felt a little bit of that was too much, or like when I first found out they were twins and I thought, I don't know how I'm going to do this. What was I thinking? I feel not as much today, but for sure for that first year, I felt so much guilt for every piece of time that I thought I shouldn't have done this.
Yeah. Yeah. And then through that, the relief from having extra appointments because you had the IUI,
Mhm.
and then to having the burden of knowing that something was wrong and the confusion of what to do in that, to the relief that maybe it's not so bad, to just you're thrust into this world now where you don't have any living children. You
Yeah.
thought at one point you were going to have two. You were nurturing this pregnancy for the one, and now you don't have any living children. Um, what what was your reentrance into the normal world like after that? Because you're not married, you don't have any living children, you've just endured the unimaginable. You had to have, a funeral for your baby.
Mhm.
What was life like after that?
I would be lying if I said it was anything but hell. That first year was horrible, and I can't even say that getting out into the normal world was normal at that time. I was a mess. Some of my close friends will tell you, like, Heather, you were a wreck. Honestly, things really started to turn around for me when I started to come to group.
Mm,
But before that, I was just not myself. I kept myself as busy as I could, but I got a full 12 weeks off of work, which was needed. Um,
yeah,
I started having, for the first time in my life, panic attacks, which I thought were made up in your mind until I started having them myself. Um, so I now know that panic attacks are a real thing and they come on for no reason at all.
yeah.
I had so many things going on through my body that I didn't know was going to happen. Like every
Mhm,
time something happened, I had like a breakdown. So, and it was all about things that nobody tells you about, right? Like, and things I should have known, but I wasn't thinking about. Like within the week after I had my baby, that your milk would come in, but you wouldn't have a baby to feed. And then that would send you into a spiral. Um, Getting to her funeral and feeling like everyone's just staring at you and you're not really breaking down anymore because all you've done is break down and you kind of just want everyone to go away. And that's
mm,
horrible to say that, but I didn't have a a love for people anymore. I just didn't really want people to be around because I didn't want to fake being happy. So it took me a really long time to get through all the first. Her July 4th, you're supposed to be out celebrating. That was her due date. So then I felt, and it was weird. It was like my body hurt. Like your
mhm,
body, the grief that your body goes through, it's not even just emotional, it's physical.
yeah,
Every ounce of my joints and everything, like everything hurt. So that first year, I wouldn't even say it was normal. I all of a sudden, a person who was a lover of kids and babies, I wanted nothing to do with them. I didn't want anyone to bring their baby near me. I didn't want to see a baby. When I'd hear a baby cry, I could almost cry just thinking because I had a lot of like nightmares right away afterwards because
mhm,
I never got to hear her cry. And I used
mhm,
to have this weird nightmare where I'd be holding a baby, which I would assume was her, and it would open its mouth, but I couldn't hear it. So I had these like strange, like dreams that would it was kind of like I beat myself up, you know, in my sleep, in the day, like it didn't
Yeah.
matter. Luckily for me, my friend had her two girls that lived in the house, and then um, I helped take them to like activities and stuff. So I just didn't lay in bed all day. Like I would go out and do activities, but that first year was not good. I drank way too much. I just didn't have the same zest for life that I had previously. And the closer I got to my birthday, then that January, I was like, I don't want to celebrate my birthday because this is unfair. Like, why am I here breathing, living, and you couldn't, you know, I had so much anger towards God that year, like so many questions. Like, I was just mad. I was just not, and some days were better than others, but most days were terrible. Then
Hmm.
you get to year two, and it's not better, but maybe you're handling it a little bit better or giving yourself a little bit better grace. Like I think that first year I really beat myself up about how I felt about things and trying not to feel, which that just turned into a bigger mess. Um and now as I go, like things are much better and I can tell people think it's better too. Cause like
Hmm.
I had an aunt that gifted me something this year for Christmas and she's like, well, you don't have to open it here if you don't want to. And I'm like, I'll open it. It's fine. And I could tell it had something to do with Palmer. And it was an ornament and it was very wonderful. And I appreciated it. But my family doesn't forget about her. No one's afraid to talk about her in front of me anymore. And I felt like for a long time, nobody wanted to say anything. Like it was like, ooh, Heather
Yeah.
had a baby that died, you know? So
Yep.
people like treat you with kid gloves too. And as much as that's appreciated in a way, at the same time, just say her name. Just say it. But I
Yeah.
get it because then at the time that first year I probably have been like, don't say her name. So you know, like it's like you're kind of, you know, in that really weird spot between a rock and a hard place. And I think everybody is. I think there's just fear and hurt with your family. And then there's your own fear and hurt, and you have to kind of deal with your own stuff. And hopefully they can deal with theirs. And my
Yeah.
family went through a rocky patch. I mean, and I didn't even have a husband and kids to deal with, but I had parents and a sister and it wasn't great. I mean, we hurt each other's feelings and a lot of things happened that first year that we probably all regret, but
Mhm.
it was what it was at the time because nobody knew how to navigate that. And you
Yeah.
never will. Like there's no book on how to grieve your baby the right way,
Yeah.
how to keep breathing without your baby. That's unwritten. And so I just you just have to kind of figure out how to roll with the punches if you can. And I was lucky enough to have a great support group, even with my family and us not, you know, getting along all the time with things. But I had great friends, and I don't know what I would have done without group and meeting you. You know, like there's just so many things that happened along the way that were just blessings that I wouldn't have anticipated.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's one thing I would say to encourage any newly bereaved parent is to look for that support because it's not just going to come to you.
No, absolutely not. And you don't it's fine to just have your friends and your family as support, but you really need to find those people that that's happened to also.
Yeah.
Because you know, sitting in that room and hearing what everyone had to say, it's like, I felt that way. Like, oh, you that happened to you. Like you just all of a sudden you feel like, oh, I'm not going crazy. I'm not, you know, like I'm not handling this the wrong way because you really feel lost. Like you're on
Yeah.
this roller coaster ride that's never going to stop and you can't figure out how to slow it down or speed it up in the parts you want to go faster, but it's something about that community. Although I would love I love the way we met and I love that we've been friends. I don't want more people to join our group. Um, you know, like it's not my wish for more people to go through this crap,
Right. Right.
this living hell, but um at the same time I know it happens and it's out there, but yeah, same. I would encourage someone to reach out. There's so many great things out there and I received so many things even in the hospital. Um
Hmm.
that's how I found out actually about your group. It just took me like, you know, almost a year to show up, but it's fine. It's fine. I got there eventually.
You eventually made it there. You made it
Eventually.
there when the time was right, and that's another thing too, like, it's different for everyone. We had people show up, a week after their loss. We had people show up months after their loss. The timeline is gonna be different for everybody. The important thing is that there is support out there for you
Right.
and that you feel comfortable and confident when you are ready to go and seek it out. So what is your view of motherhood? What is motherhood like to you today, these 5, 6 years later, um, having to parent from this side of the grave?
Most days it's okay.
Mhm.
Some days is harder still than others. It's weird still sometimes to be called a mom. I'm getting better. I'm getting better because I gave birth to my child. Like I went into full labor, like all the things. Like I gave birth to my child. And even if I hadn't, I also have a twin baby that's no longer that I just didn't get to meet, right?
Yeah.
So I do I'm giving myself more grace these days to remember I am a mom. um, Mother's Day, I pretty much don't talk to anybody. I just take my day. My mom, unfortunately, is the unfortunate
Yeah.
circumstance of that day.
Yeah.
But she's grown, and that's the thing over 5 to 6 years, your family grows with you too. So they've
Yeah.
become, they come to know. And, Palmer was born May 4th, and we buried her Mother's Day weekend, the following weekend. So that, those are just 2 hard weeks for me. So it's like her
Mhm.
birthday and then that. But um, I still give myself the time I need. It's hard some days to fathom that I don't have a child. I probably won't ever have a child because although I give major props to those of you that are like, yep, we're going to try again, I, and also being single probably puts a little bit more pressure on there, but I'm kind of at the point where I don't have a desire to be pregnant again because it scares me. Um,
Mhm.
I will be the first to admit that I used to be like, my biggest fear was, I don't know, snakes or mice. Probably mice is probably my biggest fear. Still probably one of my bigger fears today, but my biggest fear now would be to be pregnant again. Um,
Yeah.
just because of the unknowns. And I know that may sound silly to some, but that's the truth that I'm living. Um, some other forms, like I would love to adopt, but it is very expensive. And on a single person income, it's just not as, I'm not as capable as I'd like to be. Plus, I'm not getting younger. I am getting older by the minute. Actually, tomorrow is my birthday, so I gain a year already tomorrow. Um, and so, I mean, there's parts of me that it hurts still, and then I
Mhm.
have cousins who are still having babies and I love them. I adore every single one of them, and I don't have a fear of picking up a child anymore and like bursting into tears and just combusting. But
Yeah.
um I love every minute of it, but there's a part of you that just, you're like, huh, like I won't have that. And it's just
Yeah.
kind of it's a solemn and lonely sometimes feeling. But for the most part, I've learned to deal with it, right? Like I've learned to rely on the fact that I know that one day I will see her again and I will hold her. And until then, I have grandpas and grandma and people that are holding her in my place and we're there for her. um so I just kind of hold on to those things, and I've had a few mysterious things happen, I shall say, um, that I really feel were signs from her. So I don't feel alone in
Yeah.
that aspect. But yeah, it's hard. Like some days are hard. Most days are pretty good, but you just never know when all of a sudden you're feeling it, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, Heather, I gotta tell you, it took some guts to get on this podcast about the motherhood journey and experience and share your story about Palmer. And I'm so thankful that you agreed to come on here and share her story. It's a beautiful thing when a bereaved mom can can share so candidly about their child and experience. So from all of the moms listening today, Heather, thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you, Val. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. To join our exclusive TME community, head on over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below, and we'll catch you next time.